Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're at episode 481. Now, this episode is going to look a little bit different from usual to those who are catching the live stream. I'm not sitting in a room with producer and anybody else to help me today, and we are doing a little bit of a technology test. So thank you to any of those who are watching the live stream, and thanks you to everybody else who's listening into the usual audio podcast. Well, without further ado, let's jump straight in, and I would like to introduce our guest for this show, who is Jeff Thorne. Welcome along, Jeff. How are you?
G'day, Paul. Thanks very much.
Now, Jeff, maybe you can fill our audience in on where you fit into this big wide world of technology and telecommunications in New Zealand.
Sure. Well, I'm the CEO of the Telecommunications Forum, and that's the industry body that looks after the self-regulatory codes and the work that the industry does. So I'm involved with bringing the industry together to resolve industry-wide issues, processes, things like the emergency calling code where the industry agrees how we will deal with emergency calls and how they'll be prioritised. But we also provide a range of consumer services. So we provide advice on our website. We run the recycling program for mobile phones. We manage the interoperability of the companies, the porting data and IPMS, which is the porting number database that the companies use. So it's basically some services to consumers and the industry, and bringing the industry together to develop industry codes for the way that they interact with each other.
Well, that's excellent. And, of course, now with being in this time of COVID-19, you're playing quite an important role there in terms of, really ensuring everybody's on the same page, and I think, sharing a fair chunk of advice as well online. So it's great to have you on the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Paul. It's right at the moment what we're doing is acting as that link between the industry and the government, particularly some of the government departments, making sure that we can provide all the data that they need, the prioritisation, making sure that the government priorities are being fed through to the industry and likewise back again to the government. So that's quite an important role. We're quite a small team, but we've got a lot of support from the industry for what we're doing at the moment.
That's fantastic. Well, let's dive in. Now, first up, I would like to thank our show partners. And it's really because of their support that we're going to be able to keep going, especially through this time. And we've got a fair bit of content lined up over the next few days and weeks ahead, and we'll be talking to people from really right across the industry. But certainly over the next few days, a fair bit with the leaders from the telecommunications and the tech world to really draw in on their advice and experiences to date. But yeah, big thank you to our partners, Sumo Logic, Vodafone New Zealand, Spark, Vocus, HP and Samsung. So it's them that's keeping the show running. So thank you to our partners. Now, before we sort of dive into talk a little bit about COVID-19 and really its impact and some of the considerations that we should be having, there were a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. Apple have announced their new iPad Pro tablets, for want of a better word, because I guess these are the iPad Pro is very much becoming this converged device in some ways, maybe a long way from what the iPad was first sort of dreamed of as. And of course, in the most recent software that we saw, where Apple moved to iPad OS, we saw the introduction of support for a mouse, and now we have Apple I guess making the iPad Pro, as their advertising says, a computer, and in a bit more of a traditional sense. So, you will be able to use your iPad with this new keyboard that's coming for it, that will basically turn the iPad Pro into a laptop of sorts. Of course, it is running a mobile operating system, so there are some limitations there. But by having this new keyboard, which has a trackpad on it, and of course you've got the stylus as well, there are certainly shades of the early tablets that came out from Microsoft all those years ago. It must be going back about 20 years when we saw Microsoft sort of entering that tablet world, and of course it didn't sort of work out too well, and really until recent years. Jeff, what sort of devices do you use? Has this caught your attention at all, what Apple are doing with their the iPad Pro and making it more that sort of crossover device between a tablet and a laptop?
I only keep loosely in touch with what's happening in the tech world. I sort of look at products that are coming through every now and again, but when I use a Lenovo laptop, which folds back and looks like a tablet, so it's a tablet and a laptop, so I'm using sort of both of those facilities.
The Yoga, I imagine, is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very versatile. I use OneNote a lot, and I find that the ability to just flick stuff in there and then find it again easily is very useful. So everything sort of links in towards that.
Yeah.
So I don't use the Apple. I have used Apple in the past, but I found the closed system very frustrating.
Right. All right. Now, I guess most of the other things we're going to talk about. Actually, there's another topic that's down the Apple front that we'll mention first. Last week, I got some communications from Apple, and they're launching an update for their Watch 4 and Watch 5 or Series 4 and 5 watches, and they're enabling the electrocardiogram or ECG, which of course is a medical test that helps look for abnormalities and revealing whether a wearer, for instance, has an irregular heart rhythm. And we'd heard about this coming to the US, but Apple weren't comfortable sort of launching that globally. But that has now arrived, so I've just got that on Apple Watch today, actually, that installed. I think I got an alert yesterday and it's come out. On another episode, I will talk about the new Withings activity watch with ECG monitor. That one's just arrived in today. So it's not only Apple that are doing the ECG monitoring, but for those who are in the Apple ecosystem, I'm sure they're quite happy to have that offered to them via an update. All right, now let's jump into talking a little bit more around what's happening with COVID-19. Now, Jeff, I imagine you're across what our ISPs are doing and our telcos are doing in terms of last week on the show. Actually, I made a comment that it'd be really great if it's at all practical for our internet providers to do something similar to what we were seeing in the US with removal of data caps, and pleasing to see that was enacted fairly quickly soon after. So I'll take all the credit for that, of course. But
really stepped up to that.
Yeah, no, very, very, very pleasing to see that. Look, I guess across the industry, there's been a real effort made to, ensure that people are going to be able to successfully work from home without challenges of data caps getting in the way, and of course, I think we've obviously. Yeah, been pretty pleased about that, and Chorus most recently has also sort of stepped in from a wholesale perspective. Can you share a little bit about what's sort of happened there, and your knowledge of what's going on, and how much of a challenge is it for the telcos to adjust things like this at the drop of a hat?
Oh, it's been a bit of a challenge, Paul. I mean, the industry's made huge investment over the last few years, and when you look at things like the Rugby World Cup, and the industry stepped up collectively there to make sure that the right investments were being made to ensure that there was plenty of capacity. So there's a lot of investment there. There was capacity added, and then when we get to this year and the COVID-19, again, each company has looked at it. They're all Kiwis. They're run by Kiwis. So they're quite keen to support New Zealanders as we go through this. So the caps came off very quickly. There's also been a few other initiatives. I think some of them have dropped late payment fees. They've indicated they won't disconnect people if payments are late. So they really are supporting New Zealanders. And we're working closely with the Ministry of Education on closing gaps in connectivity for students if they've got to work from home. So there's been a lot of effort by the industry. I think they've really stepped up.
Yeah, that's really pleasing, and that's certainly another aspect is how education continues, and I think in the case of some schools they're starting their school holidays immediately so that they can get prepped to deliver the online courses and learning, which makes certainly makes some sense because it's going to take a little while to actually get into the position where they're really ready to go, I imagine.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of work just identifying what the gaps are, what the priorities are, what connections we can actually provide. And some of the areas are actually quite a long way from fibre networks. So it's a question of what copper networks have we got, what fixed wireless can be provided, what stock have the retailers got so that they can actually provide hardware into the homes to support that. So there's a lot of work happening at the moment to bring all of that together, and that's part of the work that I'm involved with at the moment.
Oh, that is really pleasing, and I imagine not too easy logistically trying to juggle this while so many people are trying to get fully operational and productive in their homes. Now, look, for a lot, especially those that would be listening to this show, many of you will be already geared up and able to operate at a pretty reasonable level. But of course, there are some challenges when we try to do this stuff en masse, whether it's as from a work perspective or from an education perspective. There are just realities of things that need to be addressed, and I think we've seen retail stores selling out of desks and chairs for people to set up their home offices. So there are some of those very obvious things, but of course there's lots that really is going on behind the scenes from that perspective of telecommunications providers and I guess the IT sector in general. And I saw somebody sharing on Facebook around their current workload compared to a normal day, and I think they had about 3 times as much on their plate as was normal in terms of dealing with some IT support type requests. So it's going to be a very busy time, at least initially. And then from there, look, it's hard to know exactly how it's going to play out. I imagine, but really, it's these couple of days until we get through to where everyone is kind of under that 4-week lockdown. Now, I guess other aspects that we need to be thinking about as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Now, one of them is on the cybersecurity front, and last week, I talked about the cautiousness that we need to have ourselves and encourage with those that are maybe a little bit less technically inclined. And I mentioned a series of text messages I'd been getting from Ryman Healthcare, and I was just using that as a little bit of an example. But I pointed out that the way their text messages were coming through, it wasn't clear that they were from Ryman Health, and they were using URLs. Or website addresses that were obfuscated, so it wasn't actually clear that clicking those links was going to take you to Ryman Health. We're very pleased to say that shortly after that podcast episode was published, that they've picked up on that after quite a series of text messages following that format, and they're now being very clear right at the top of each message and saying that it's from Ryman Healthcare, and they're giving a link to, I think it's rymanhealthcare.co.nz. So just really pleasing to see that everyone's working together, everyone's trying to do their part to step things up, but I think it will remain that there is a considerable risk around cybersecurity during this time, and so we'd really encourage those of our listeners that are clued up on the things to look out for to do educate your friends and family. In the last week since the last episode, I've had probably 4, maybe 5 phone calls that have been from a couple of different African countries. One of them, the number when it came up on my phone looked a little bit like it was a local call. It looked like it was an 021 number that was calling me. But I looked a little bit closer, I saw it was 0021. And so, it's just part of the many scams that go on. I guess in that case, they're hoping that I would see a missed call, or if I answered it, then they would hang up the call and hope maybe I would call them back, and generating some call revenue. Do you have any thoughts on this, Jeff? How hard is it for our telecommunications providers to deal with these types of scenarios? Because of course the scam calls are mixed up with legitimate calls, and we need to be able to make and receive calls to all parts of the world.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, Paul. We've put together a code. Actually, it was an informal process across the industry for people in each company to compare notes and exchange information about scams. But what we've done now is we've actually formalized that process so that we can plug information in and it goes across the industry much faster and allows us to block those calls off. But what we've also done is we've engaged with a whole pile of third parties. So we've got DIA, the Commission for Financial Capability, CERT, NetSafe, and some of the banks actually signed up to the same process, so that as they get information about scams from their customers and we can identify the numbers, we can actually plug that directly into the industry and we can block those calls. So it's a real issue, but we're doing quite a lot to actually try and stop it. It's a real challenge, and these things keep bouncing back. It's like whack-a-mole, where you just block a number and then they come straight back in and another spoofed number.
Sure. Now, the other thing that's been on my mind from a cybersecurity perspective is this challenge that we have. We've moved to a world where multi-factor authentication is really needed to keep accounts secure. But we've started in New Zealand seeing porting of numbers in an illegitimate manner, or so I've heard. You'd probably be a bit closer to this, but I was thinking through the process of porting a number, because with the new Apple Watch, if you're on the Spark network, then you can basically add an eSIM to it and have your number shared across a primary handset and the Apple Watch, and Spark's the only one that does that at the moment. I know it's coming to Vodafone as well. I think mid-year was the last comment from them, but I was pretty keen to try it out, so I was thinking of porting my number. Now, in the current climate and just how busy I imagine that everyone is at our telcos, I'm not sure whether I should sit back and wait. But it I guess reminded me that it's not that hard to port a number, And when we think about moving a domain name from, say, one provider to another, you not only need to know the domain name, but you also get issued with a little key, and in New Zealand we call it a UDI code. But it's in addition to having a few other bits and pieces of information to transfer a domain over, and I guess it got me to thinking: should we have, I guess, a second factor or another another check when it comes to porting numbers? I guess the ease of being able to port numbers in New Zealand has been hugely beneficial from a competition perspective in recent years. It means it is very easy to move from one telco to another. But as we've seen, certainly internationally, there is I guess an increasing risk, because all you sort of need to know, if I remember correctly, is the number that you want to port, and I think it's the account number of the provider that it's with currently, and the name of the provider. Have I got that roughly about right there, Jeff?
Pretty close. I mean, you're right in the respect that porting in New Zealand is very easy, and it's been made deliberately so. There's a range of regulations in place from the Commerce Commission that the industry has to adhere to, and the industry manages the porting process, and all of that is intended to make it as easy as possible for the consumer to do that. But what you're raising is a very valid point, and that is that it also makes it easier for fraudsters to actually port numbers to get access to the two-factor authentication. So we're trying to close that down as much as possible. If you do a SIM swap, which is putting a new SIM into a phone and getting the number transferred to the new phone, and it's within the provider, we've got steps in place that the retailers work through now to try and make sure that the identity is appropriate. And we're also looking at some technical solutions for porting, where the system itself will generate a text to the number to say this number is about to be ported. If that's you, then press yes. And all of that's intended to try and make sure that it's the actual owner of the phone and the number that's porting the number onto another device.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. That confirmation via text message, just as an extra layer. That's really encouraging too. So, great to hear that you're already across that and working on it, Jeff. Fantastic.
We're not quite there, but we're hoping to get it in place. There are some fish hooks in there, but we're doing what we can to get through that.
Yep. Oh, well done. Now, on to what else have we got? I'm keen to hear from you how our infrastructure is generally holding up in New Zealand. I discussed it, a short interview on TV3 this morning around my feelings, which is very much that we have absolutely world class broadband infrastructure here in New Zealand, and I guess that's the result of a decade or more of investment in the ultra-fast broadband initiative or the ultra-fast broadband, and in the rural broadband initiative, and then the UFB2 and so on. So those things have been expanded out, and it seems to leave us in a pretty good state. Certainly for those that are on fixed connections or fibre. I guess we maybe see some challenges with mobile networks, and we saw a bit of a challenge yesterday with an extreme amount of calling, maybe knocking, causing a bit of a knock-on effect with phone calls, and that was actually quite unprecedented in that we had telcos encouraging the use of voice over internet type calling, which of course in years gone by it was a traditional calling that was always sort of the gold standard. So that was interesting, but I think it just highlighted how good our internet infrastructure is.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that, Paul. It's pretty good. There's a lot of spare capacity in the fixed line network, but that's not to say that it won't slow down from time to time as congestion does hit one or two particular spots. There were some problems yesterday and a little bit, I think, this morning with calling with the voice network. But I think if you look at what's been happening over the last few years, I mean, voice calling has been gradually going down. We tend to communicate now through the same way you and I are right now, which is using Skype or other video conferencing over the top tools, or social messaging and other apps. So the demand for data has increased exponentially over the last few years. Voice calling has been on a downward trend. And then when you have something like the announcements that were made yesterday, I think people just pick up the phone and start making calls. I know my phone's been going crazy over the last 2 days, and I'm talking to a lot more people. And part of what's driving that is the fact that I need to get answers and I need action on certain things, or other people need action quickly, and they don't want to wait for an email to land and then for me to get around to it. So that demand has been huge. The network is pretty good, and it certainly stands up to normal use and will stand up, I think, to people working from home. But the desire over the last couple of days for people to talk to other people has created a range of congestion problems.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I think it's it's encouraging how well our as you say, over the top type services and voice and video over the internet type services now work. I guess the challenge we have with those is that there just are so many of them. And so that's why people probably, we all fell back to doing standard phone calls, because there isn't sort of a default go-to yet that we use to contact everybody. And of course, we do have a great range of tools. And I think the last week or so has probably been pretty interesting in terms of internet usage stats, and I don't know what all of those look like at the moment, but we'll certainly be chatting to some of the telcos over the next few days with some extra episodes and trying to get their feedback. I'm not sure if you've got any visibility on those numbers at all, Jeff, but for me, when I'm having a team meeting in the morning with my team, and we've got maybe a dozen people connected online, 10 to 12 people connected over a video call. That's quite a bit of bandwidth when you look at that, and it's sort of happening all at once. And I think for probably hundreds of thousands of people around the country each morning for those sort of team meetings and gatherings.
Yeah, I think the network's standing up to that pretty well. As I said, it was mostly the voice network yesterday that was a problem, and it was largely in the interconnections between the companies. And I'm seeing a range of numbers from the companies about traffic volumes. In some cases, we're seeing quite high peaks during the day, which we don't normally see. In other cases, some of the operators are saying that they're not seeing as much traffic as they saw during the Rugby World Cup. So it's not really clear just yet exactly where we're heading to. Certainly there's an increased demand, but the data network is certainly holding up really well. The voice network, I think, will gradually get back into a new norm. But at the moment, there's a reasonable amount of capacity there. It's just the demand over the last 2 days has been unprecedented in terms of the nature of what's going on and the reaction that people had.
Yeah, and look, I think it's it's really pleasing actually that we had the Rugby World Cup being a streaming service, because what that meant was all of our internet service providers put in this huge effort to ensure that there was network capacity for that, and of course that's actually left us in a really good state for the current time. Now, as we start moving into this 5G world, I think also I'm encouraged that we are going in that direction, because in scenarios like this, we need as much bandwidth as possible to people, regardless of how they're connecting. So being able to get those better amounts of performance, or having a higher density of people connected off cell sites, it's exactly these sorts of times, and not that we hope that this will continue for too long or that it'll occur again. But it is one of those scenarios where we're really taking advantage of previous investments that were put in to deliver 4G across the country and to deliver the ultra fast broadband. So that's pretty pleasing. Now, are there any other sort of insights and things that you've been across that you would like to share on things that the Telecommunications Forum has been involved in under your watch?
I think one of the key things is providing advice to consumers about what they do with their home network. So what you've been talking about, Paul, I certainly agree with. There's been a lot of investment in the telecommunications networks over the last few years, and the industry's really stepped up to that. But where it falls down a little bit, I think, is in the home network, where people get a connection, they put the Wi-Fi at one end of the house, and then they go and try and work from home, and they're at the other end of the house. So we've just released some stuff which we put on our website, an infographic, which has got some very basic information about how to actually improve that. So it's got common sense things like, show your Wi-Fi a little bit of love and just move closer to it.
Yep.
And if you can, plug stuff into it. If you can plug your TV and your laptop, your gaming console, if you can plug those in, your Wi-Fi is going to be faster because it frees up the radio signal for the rest of the house. And put extenders into the house. If you're going to work from the far end of the house while the kids are streaming Netflix, put an extender in between you and the Wi-Fi. So there's some information on our website that we've just put up. As I said, it's basic, but it's things that people just don't think about, but it will improve the home network service.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm just having a quick look now, and I'm seeing exactly that, how to get the best from your home network. And look, these are things that often aren't communicated too well. So it's certainly helpful that that's something that the New Zealand Telecommunications Forum has picked up. So well done. That's great.
Good.
All right, now just having a look at what else we've got. We've got there on our list. I think we've covered off most of the bits and pieces. We were also hoping to have one of the team from Unitech join us in relation to the course that they've been running. Their cybersecurity course, which I was pretty pleased to hear about them establishing this course, but unfortunately, with what's gone on with COVID-19, they are absolutely flat stick getting that course into a position so that they can run it remotely over the weeks ahead and convert that to be available for online learning from next week. So totally understand why that's been a bit of a challenge for them today. But we'll look forward to engaging with them in the future on that one, and gaining a little bit of understanding on how that's going. But certainly we do have that challenge in New Zealand in that we're I guess competing with the rest of the world for talent, and that there probably hasn't been enough training when it comes to helping people become experts in cybersecurity. So I think that's going to be a really valuable course in the future. I guess we finish up with just that reminder to be really thinking through the things that might put your organisation at risk from a cybersecurity perspective during this time. What can you do to educate your people? And we do have challenges. Not everybody has a company provided laptop or device that's managed and kept patched and secure and locked down in appropriate ways, so they're not operating with admin access and all those sort of things that often home computers are. If you've got people that are having to access work things through a web browser or what have you, definitely would be encouraging anyone that's in that position to be sharing appropriate advice and tips out there. If your team hasn't been well trained to date. All right, well, that's us for this episode. Now, Jeff, just back to you. What's the best way for people to keep in touch with what TCF or Telecommunications Forum is up to? Is that through your website or their social media channels they should be looking at? Where are the best places?
Probably through our website, Paul. We put updates on there about what we're doing, and all the information that we've got about our codes and consumer services is all on our website. It's probably the best place to keep in touch with what we're doing.
Yep, okay. That's good. Well, so that's at tcf.org.nz. Also, there is, of course, the official government website, covid19.gov.nz, to keep up to date with things at a high level. We have other information in there from Ministry of or MBIE. Their website has information, as well as Ministry of Health. So there's some pretty good official resources online already, and have come together, I got to say, pretty smartly. So it's pleasing to see those resources online, and also the telcos. And I think if you have a look, especially our show partners, we'll call them out for doing a great job. Sharing what they're up to and what you need to know. So each of them, if you go to their websites, has got information as far as COVID-19 is involved, and fair few comments. And we will be engaging with as many of our show partners over the next few days to really see what we can learn from them. How are they running their organisations remotely? How do you handle trying to, in some cases, lead a really big team without being able to interact with them in person? And really, what are the things that are working and what's not? But pleasing to see that I think most of the country has moved pretty smartly into working remotely without too much drama. And I think that's a testament to an incredible workforce that we have here in New Zealand. Both from the technology perspective and the telecommunications perspective, that have really helped pull these things together very quickly. So thanks everybody for listening in. This has been the New Zealand Tech Podcast. As I say, we will be back with more content, probably ahead of next Tuesday when our normal episode would be. And we do have some other extra special episodes that we will be sharing over the coming weeks as well. So some episodes that we've recorded recently. There's a drones one and some other ones coming up. So thanks everyone, and don't forget to look out for us now across multiple social media channels. So this episode has actually been streamed, I believe, onto YouTube, New Zealand Tech Podcast on there. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and you can also track us down on LinkedIn now. So, a bit of an expanded locations that you can reach us. And if you've got questions or concerns, things that you're tackling or things that you've learned, would love to hear from you. So, feel free to get in touch. You can reach me directly, paul.spain@gorillahq.com. All right, thanks everyone. See you later, and thanks Jeff for being on the show. It's been really great to have you joining us.
Thanks, Paul. Been my pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.